Philippine monkey-eating eagle, a noble bird. But nobility has helped little. This is the world's rarest eagle, reduced today to a mere 50 pairs.
Howdy, how's it going? Thanks for joining me. My name's Zav and this is my channel Bird Fari. So today we're going to talk about the Philippine Eagle, sometimes called the Great Philippine Eagle and formerly known as the monkey-eating eagle. I don't have any Philippine Eagle toys, figurines, but I have a harpy eagle here, which is pretty close. Anyway, so last time I was talking about the umbrella cockatoo or white cockatoo, and that was kind of a mixed bag of, depressing in that they're highly endangered in their native Indonesia islands near New Guinea, North Maluku Islands. But then on the upside, they're an incredibly popular bird worldwide, and they do breed fairly well in captivity. Plus, there's a introduced population in Hawaii, which seems to be doing quite well, and even crossbreeding with salmon-crested cockatoos or Moluccan cockatoos. Situation perhaps happening with the yellow-crested cockatoos in Hong Kong, where they're very highly endangered in their native Indonesia, and apparently the population in Hong Kong represents 10 to 20% of the total wild population. In terms of the genetic diversity, those cockatoos in Hong Kong, which are escaped pet birds, feral birds, escaped from zoos or private owners, again, if the conditions improve in those Indonesian islands, they could be brought back there to restock them in their native land. So I guess what I'm saying is I try to be optimistic when it comes to nature, and most of the news we hear is all doom and gloom. And yet when I hear about stories like those cockatoos in Hong Kong or the cockatoos in Hawaii, I find this as a source of optimism that there are other ways that animals can survive. In recent years, a lot of talk about bringing back the dodo, extinct dodo, the most famous extinct bird. There's been millions of dollars of research into bringing back extinct woolly mammoths. Now, Peter Jackson, the director of Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies, he's talking about trying to use some of his money and his connections to help bring back the extinct moa. It's a 3-meter bird, much bigger than an ostrich. Bring that back to New Zealand that have been extinct there for 700-800 years. So to me, it's very odd that we have these extremes where you have these hardcore conservationists that you can never ever introduce, a non-native species to where they weren't originally. And then on the other hand, you have all this, popular movies and fiction and wealthy individuals who want to bring back extinct species. And I think there should be some room for nuance in between. And that's, as I say, why I think, to my thinking, it's actually a good thing that there are, wild umbrella cockatoos in Hawaii, because, if you wanted to see an umbrella cockatoo in, Bacan Island or one of those islands in Indonesia, it would be extremely difficult. I mean, I searched last week for some videos of those cockatoos. I couldn't find any video footage. I could find some photos. But if you wanted to see a wild umbrella cockatoo in Hawaii, you could do it. And they talk about what's the purpose of zoos. Zoos are partly there to breed endangered species, and a great example of that is the California condor, thanks to the Los Angeles Zoo and San Diego Wildlife Park. I think they recently renamed it, but those two zoos basically saved the California condor from extinction because they went extinct in the wild, and at one stage the California condor was down to 22 birds. So there's an example of where zoos really stepped up to the plate and literally saved a species and saved the largest flying bird in North America, one of the largest birds in the world, iconic species, and now they're being reintroduced to the wild. They're even flying not only in California, but in Arizona, in the Grand Canyon, and in parts of Mexico, Baja California. So that's an incredible success story. Okay, so let's get to today's topic, the They're talking about the Philippine Eagle. As I said at the beginning, it's a mixed bag on this one because overall it is a pretty depressing picture. I mean, these birds have been highly endangered for decades, and I remember as a young child reading about them, and it seemed that they were on the edge of extinction, 40 years ago. I'm 47 now, so yeah, I first got interested in Philippine eagles 40 years ago when I think my grandparents gave me a book all about nature, and at the back of the book they had a listing of the world's most endangered animals, and among them were like the Javan rhino, the Javan tiger. Since that book was published, the Javan tiger has gone extinct. The Javan rhino is hanging on by a thread, only found in one national park, Ujung Kulong National Park in northern Java, the northwestern tip of Java, just very close to Krakatoa. Philippine eagles have been highly endangered my whole lifetime, and if trends had continued 40 years ago, it's very likely they would already be extinct. So the fact that they're still surviving and they've been bred in captivity, that is great. That is very encouraging. I mean, okay, different cases. The Philippine eagle has never been as rare as the California condor. The California condor, it got right down to the edge, 22 birds. I mean, that's on the precipice of being... I mean, they were extinct in the wild, but they're on the precipice of being functionally extinct, where there weren't enough birds that you could even have enough genetic diversity to rebuild the stock, rebuild the numbers. As for the Philippine eagle, and in captivity, I believe there are 36 birds at a breeding center in Davao, and there's a few others in zoos across the Philippines. I think there's a couple in the Manila Zoo. There's one in Singapore. The one bird in Singapore is officially the only Philippine eagle outside of the Philippines at the moment. As of 2025, there is only one Philippine eagle officially outside the Philippines. I think it probably is the only one. I mean, there's a chance that there's some, smuggler has managed to get out a Philippine eagle. There could be a private collection. I mean, it sounds crazy, but these things have happened before. For example, I did a movie review a couple of weeks ago on Rio that was about the Spix's macaw, and there was a bird called Presley, named after Elvis Presley, that was found in, was it Minnesota? No, it was found in Colorado. Yeah, in the movie they said Minnesota, but actually it was found in Colorado in 2002. In a private bird collection, and then they sent that bird back to Brazil to be part of the breeding program. So it's possible that something like that has happened. You could have of course, a lot of rare wildlife is smuggled through Southeast Asia, so there might be a private collector who has a Philippine eagle somewhere in China or Vietnam, who knows, but officially the only Philippine eagle outside the Philippines now is called Sambisig, or Sam for short. That's a female bird. So there was a pair of Philippine eagles until 2 years ago. So sadly, Geo Mika, Geo for short, that was the male bird. He passed away 2 years ago from an infection. So they were loaned to Singapore from the Philippines as part of the 50th anniversary of the Philippines-Singapore diplomatic relations. But sadly, that loan began in 2019. So from 2019 to 2023, there were 2 Philippine eagles in Singapore, the only Philippine eagles outside of the Philippines, and then so for the last 2 years there's only been the one, and that's Sam. So Sam Bisig, Sam is all alone now. So since Geo Mika, since he passed away 2 years ago, there have been several articles about that the Philippines is planning to restart their breeding program. I mean, actually, the eagles in Singapore didn't have any offspring. They were only there for 4 years before Geo passed away. But the plan was for them to try and start a breeding program outside of the Philippines. To my thinking, it seems like a little bit of a token effort. I mean, if they were serious about trying to start a breeding program outside of the Philippines, I think you'd need more than 2 birds only, but I guess you've got to start somewhere. So, as I said, this video is going to be a mixed bag, but to me, this is one of the kind of depressing things. Not only depressing that Geo passed away, but it's sad that 2 years later, they still haven't sent another bird. I mean, of course, during the pandemic, there are excuses that it was very difficult to send animals. And I know I listened to a number of bird and animal podcasts, from 2020, 2021, 2022. Those 2 or 3 years, it was incredibly difficult because of all the quarantine regulations, incredibly difficult to send anything. To send letters abroad, packages was quite difficult, let alone sending endangered wildlife. But you would think, the Philippines and Singapore, not that far away. Singapore, one of the most developed countries in the world, very high-tech, super green city. And now they have a new bird park. They already had one of, if not the best bird park in the world, the Jurong Bird Park, which closed a couple of years ago. And then 2023, they opened Bird Paradise. And this is a new mega bird aviary in Mandai, Singapore. So they've invested, tens of millions of dollars in this amazing bird park. So that's a good thing. But that replaced the Jurong Bird Park, and they decided that the Jurong Bird Park, which already had a great reputation in Singapore, it wasn't big enough. So they wanted to expand, and so they bought some new property in Mandai. And yeah, if you look on YouTube, you can see some great videos of these amazing enclosures. Some of the best enclosures ever built for birds anywhere in terms of trying to recreate their natural environment and helping, guests or visitors to the zoo, to the aviary, to understand how these amazing birds behave in their wild state. I mean, it's not wild, but as close as you can get to their wild state. So yeah, I'm happy to see that the Singapore is leading the way with their Bird Paradise bird park. However, I'm wondering, what is the delay in sending another male Philippine Eagle there to try and get the breeding program restarted? I mean, the online articles say restart the program, and it never got started because, as far as I know, no Philippine Eagle has ever been bred outside of the Philippines. So they are incredibly difficult to breed. And relating back to the California Condor, before they were brought into captivity, I believe the first California Condor ever bred in captivity was around 1988, which was a year after the last one was brought in from the wild. So when California Condors went completely extinct in the wild, they had never successfully bred in captivity. But within a year, they managed to figure it out. And since then, they've bred hundreds. And so now I think the total population of California Condor is around 500, and more than 2/3 of those in the wild. As for the Philippine Eagle, probably more difficult to breed, but I do wonder if they've, of course, there's one key breeding facility. So at least the California Condor had those 2 zoos, Los Angeles Zoo and San Diego Wildlife Park, that had the world's best technology to try and save the species. I mean, that was a much more dire situation because only 22 birds. But in terms of trying to breed Philippine eagles in captivity, there's really only one place where that's happening, and that's the Philippine Eagle Center in Davao on the island of Mindanao. I'm sorry if my pronunciation is off. So yeah, in the Philippine Eagle Center, I mean, that's great that they have this center. I do wish that there would be more than one place where they were breeding them. So yeah, as it stands now, the lone eagle in Singapore seems more of a token. So, I mean, if you want to see a Philippine eagle, probably the best place to see them would be in Singapore, but there's only one bird there, and until they, I mean, what are they waiting for? It was already, I don't mean to be critical, but it was already kind of silly to me that they only sent 2 birds. If they were sincere about really trying to start a breeding program there, they should have at least had a couple of pairs over there, because there's always a risk that one bird might pass away or be infertile, or that the pairs don't, match well. Talking about where breeding is occurring, the Philippine Eagle Center in Davao. So the homepage says that there is 36 Philippine eagles there, 18 of which are captive bred. So that's great. So half of their 36 birds are captive bred. Yes, I should have started with the basics. I kind of got a bit carried away there. If you're not familiar with the Philippine eagle, then I'm glad you're watching my video. So let's go through some of the basic information. Critically endangered, endemic to the forests in the Philippines. It's brown and white color plumage, shaggy crest, spectacular shaggy crest, kind of like a lion. The Philippine eagle is considered the largest of the extant eagles in the world in terms of length and wing surface area, with only Steller's sea eagle and harp eagle being large in terms of weight and bulk. So the Steller's sea eagle and harp eagle are heavier, but if you're talking about the length of the body, especially the length from the tip of the beak to the tip of the tail, definitely the largest eagle. And then wing surface area. They don't have the longest wings, but they have incredibly broad wings. So on, not on weight, but if you consider, I mean, how do you denote largest? Largest, heaviest. Largest area, in terms of area, yes, definitely the largest. Longest, widest wing area. So the Philippine eagle is the largest eagle in the world. It has been declared the national bird of the Philippines. It is also depicted in the Philippines 1,000 peso note. The species has been classified by the IUCN Red List as critically endangered with a declining population and is one of the most endangered raptors in the world. The most significant threat to the species is loss of habitat, a result of high levels of deforestation throughout most of its range. Since 2019, more than 20 eagles have been rescued, mostly due to injuries from gunshot wounds. So this is in the last 5-6 years. Even though it's incredibly rare, even in the last few years, 20 eagles have been found shot. So some of those later died, some of them brought into the rescue center, I believe in Davao, on the island of Mindanao at that Philippine Eagle Center, and some of them have been rehabilitated. But the point is that people are still trying to kill them. And killing of a Philippine eagle is a criminal offense punishable by law with up to 12 years imprisonment and heavy fines. So that's a good thing. At least the Philippine government has gotten serious about punishing people. I mean, I'm from Australia, and there was a horrific case a couple of years ago where a man, he happened to be a New Zealander, but he was working on a farm in Australia, and the owner of the farm ordered him to poison as many wedge-tailed eagles as possible. And, he over 1 or 2 years, he managed to poison 450 eagles or something. And, of course, there weren't 450 wedge-tailed eagles in that area. It was basically like a sinkhole. So as the eagles got killed, younger birds would move into that territory as the young eagles looking for their own territory. And but anyway, he was found guilty. They had all the evidence on him, and I think he got like a 6-month good behavior bond and had to pay a slap on the wrist fine of a few $1,000s. And so that guy and the farmer who ordered the killings, they wiped out, like a whole region of Australia's wedge-tailed eagle population, and that could reverberate for a decade or more in terms of the impact of the population. I mean, fortunately, wedge-tailed eagles are not highly endangered. They have survived heavy persecution in the past, but the reason I'm going off on this tangent is I am shocked that in my home country of Australia that you can get away with, have all the evidence against you and, confess to poisoning 450 glorious eagles and no prison time, slap on the wrist. So at least the Philippines got serious about punishing. Whether you can actually catch people, that's another issue. I'm not sure how many people have been sent to prison. So it seems, at least in the last 5 to 6 years, at least 20 eagles have been shot. Certainly there'll be more than that because, it's so hard to monitor those, rainforest areas and the hills and mountains, volcanic areas. There's so many remote areas in the Philippines. So yeah, having strict laws is a great starting point. Enforcing them is another matter. In Australia, they don't even have harsh laws, so apparently you can decimate a species and no worries, mate. Sorry for my, my sarcasm. It's just too depressing that stuff like that still happens. The Philippine eagle, the native people in the Philippines, they had several names for it going back in history. But in modern Filipino, it is usually referred to as Háribon, and that is a portmanteau of Haring Ibon, which literally means bird king, king of the birds, bird king. Okay, the first European to study the species was the English explorer and naturalist John Whitehead in 1896. This is crazy because the Spanish colonized the Philippines more than 300 years before that. I think it was the 1580s, so the 16th century. So for those 300 plus years, there had been no explanation, no description of the Philippine eagle by those Spanish colonizers. That's crazy that the world's largest eagle and such a spectacular bird, basically went under the radar for 300 plus years. Anyway, so upon its scientific discovery, the Philippine eagle was first called the monkey-eating eagle because of reports from natives of Bonga, Samar, where the species was first discovered, that it preyed exclusively on monkeys. So that was incorrect, but they originally thought it preyed exclusively on monkeys. Later studies revealed, however, that alleged monkey-eating eagle also ate other animals such as colugos, large snakes, monitor lizards, and even large birds such as hornbills. This coupled with the fact that the same name applied to the African crowned eagle and the Central and South American harpy eagle, it was renamed Philippine Eagle in a 1978 proclamation by then President Ferdinand Marcos. Okay, 1978. So the year I was born was the year that the name changed, and this might be the only case of a president of a country renaming a bird, or for that matter, any animal. In 1995, it was declared a national emblem under President Fidel V. Ramos. The species has no recognized subspecies. So, in talking about its evolutionary history, in 1919, so 106 years ago, a study of the bird's skeletal features led to the suggestion that the nearest relative was the harpy eagle in South America, Central America. The species was included in the subfamily Harpinae, until a 2005 study of DNA sequences which identified them as not members of the group, finding instead that the nearest relative are snake eagles, such as the bachelor. The species has subsequently been placed in the subfamily Circatinae. So this is amazing. So only 20 years ago, 2005, they found out that the Philippine eagle, it emerged, evolutionary on a completely different line, and its nearest relatives are the much, much smaller snake eagles. So that's, I guess they call that convergent evolution. Convergent evolution where you have completely separate lines of species, but due to their adaptation to the natural environment, they end up looking quite similar and having similar features, similar measurements, similar prey. Another example of that would be New and Old World vultures. So apparently the Old World vultures, their nearest relatives are eagles, whereas Old World vultures, their nearest relatives are storks. And of course, storks and, like a condor or a turkey vulture, they look nothing alike, but thanks to convergent evolution. So that's basically what happened. That's why harpy eagles, crowned eagles, and the Philippine eagle are often grouped together. I mean, these are the three biggest forest eagles in the world. So I think crowned eagles and harpy eagles are in the same group, but the Philippine eagles, they're on their own. They're off on their own line. But yeah, if you go back far enough, related to, so basically like a snake eagle on steroids. They're almost twice the size on many measurements as a typical snake eagle. I mean, I guess they have snake eagles in the Philippines, like the crested serpent eagle. But yeah, Philippine eagle would be not quite, but almost twice as big on several measurements. Okay, talking about its measurements, Philippine eagle is typically reported as measuring 86 to 102 centimeters, but a survey of several specimens from some of the largest natural history collections in the world found the average was 95 centimeters for males and 105 centimeters for females. So historic collections show that the average female is 105 centimeters long. That's not wing area, that's just body length, so from the beak to the tail, or the head to the tail. Based on the later measurements, this makes it the longest extant species of eagle, as the average of the female equals the maximum reported for the harpy eagle and Steller's sea eagle. The longest Philippine eagle reported anywhere, and the longest eagle outside of the extinct Haas eagle. So there was a bigger eagle that lived in New Zealand about 800 years ago, went extinct 800 years ago, and that Haas eagle used to feed off moa. So basically when the moa went extinct after the Maori, the native people in New Zealand arrived very late. The Maori in New Zealand, they came via the Polynesian islands from Hawaii, Samoa. But even though most of the Pacific Islands were settled, thousands of years ago, it was only about 900 years ago that the Maori finally arrived there. And within a century of humans arriving in New Zealand, they had wiped out the world's largest flightless bird, the moa, and the world's largest flying bird, the Haas eagle. So, aside from the extinct Haas eagle, still, relatively recent. I mean, and Peter Jackson, as I said, the Lord of the Rings movie director from New Zealand, his dream now, his goal, I think he's serious about it. He's spending money and trying to get people to collaborate with him to bring back the moa. To my thinking, that's kind of a pipe dream, but also not the best use of money. I mean, I would like to see large flightless birds return to New Zealand. I just think the smart thing would be to reintroduce emus, emus from nearby Australia, maybe a cassowary from a more tropical area, but they're forest-dwelling flightless birds. They're the third largest bird in the world. So you talk about, don't try and reinvent the wheel. Don't try and bring back extinct species. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's a great thing. I know it's a very popular idea in fiction. Of course, Jurassic Park, Jurassic World movies have popularized that. I just feel that we have so many amazing species that are hanging on by a thread, such as the Philippine eagle, that it's kind of a waste of resources. You know, if we put all that money, all the money that's been spent on trying to bring back the dodo or bring back the woolly mammoth or the thylacine, Tasmanian tiger, Tasmanian wolf, if all that money and time had been focused on the Philippine eagle, then the Philippine eagle would currently be in a much better situation. So again, I'm disappointed that billionaires, you've got Elon Musk and you've got Jeff Bezos, they're trying to fly to space. Elon Musk, he wants to set up a colony on Mars, and who knows, maybe he can do it. But again, like the billions, trillions, whatever it's going to take to get humans to set up a colony on Mars, I think it would be much better to try and save the paradise that we have here on Earth, the Eden that's still hanging on Earth, and don't let any other glorious species go extinct, not on our watch. So you have people like James Cameron, the Titanic movie director, and Avatar. He's obviously very, very focused on conservation. So Avatar is also like a fable about saving the Amazon rainforest or stories like that. Again, why isn't James Cameron? Why isn't Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg? Why aren't these people putting their time and money into trying to rescue amazing species? I mean, of course, the Philippine eagle is not the only one, but that's the focus of today's video. So I think this is obviously worth saving. And people have been obsessed with eagles for as long as humans have been around. I mean, no wonder the bald eagle is the national bird symbol of America. And no wonder in many European buildings, you have the gargoyles with a golden eagle and crest, and you have the phoenix birds, phoenix in Western culture, in Chinese culture, Indonesian culture. Chinese culture is called the fenhuang, in Indonesian the garuda. So you have all these cultures around the world that have glorified and put eagle-like birds on a pedestal, and yet there's no captive breeding program of Philippine eagles outside of the Philippines. There's only one breeding center in the world. And what's going on? What's going on, billionaires? Get your act together. Philippine eagle has a wingspan of 184 centimeters to 220 centimeters. So yeah, in terms of wing length, wingspan, they are not the longest. I think actually the wedge-tailed eagles in Australia and white eagles across Eurasia, they have a longer wingspan, and maybe even Marshall eagles in Africa. But in terms of the total wing area, they have the largest wing area of any bird because their wings are so broad, incredibly broad, so they really stand out. When you see them soaring, they take up this massive space in the sky, plus the incredibly huge tail. Okay, distribution. Philippine eagle is endemic to the Philippines and can be found on 4 major islands: Eastern Luzon, Samar, Leyte, and Mindanao. But I'm not sure if they're still... Well, they reintroduced some to Leyte. There's contradictory information here. So they reintroduced them to Leyte a couple of years ago, but then one of those eagles died, and so it's possible there's only one Philippine eagle on the island of Leyte, Leyte. I think it's pronounced Leyte. So the stronghold is really Mindanao. There are definitely pairs on Luzon, Samar, and Mindanao, possibly pairs on Leyte, but also possibly only that one introduced bird. The largest number of eagles reside on Mindanao, with between 82 and 233 breeding pairs. Only 6 pairs are found on Samar. They say here 2 on Leyte, but again, there's contradictory information later, and a few on Luzon. So, on 3 of those islands, Samar, Leyte, and Luzon, it seems that there are only a handful of pairs on each of those. So essentially, Mindanao is the only island with a viable population still hanging on. It can be found in northern Sierra Madre National Park on Luzon, so I guess that's the northern limit of their range, and Mount Apo in Mindanao. That's one of the areas where they're most researched, and apparently one of the best areas to try and see them. So hardcore bird nerds who want to see them in the wild, they probably head to Mount Apo, APO. Mount Malindang. These are I think Mount Apo is a non-active volcano. Mount Kitanglad National Parks on Mindanao, yeah. The eagle is found in dipterocarp and mid-montane forests, particularly in steep areas. Its elevation ranges from the lowlands to mountains of over 1,800 meters. Only an estimated 9,220 square kilometers of old-growth forests remain on the bird's range. So yeah, most of the old-growth rainforest was cut down 60 plus years ago. I mean, there's been deforestation for a long time, but it was really spread up, especially from the late 60s and then early 70s. You had President Marcos, who was key to renaming the bird. I mean, he did rename the bird after the suggestion of some ornithologists and people researching, American ornithologists researching the Philippine eagle in the late 70s. But officially President Marcos gets the credit for renaming them, but he's also partly responsible for much of the destruction of the old-growth rainforest. So what I read is that the worst destruction, the vast majority of the forests were cut down post-martial law 1972, so around 50 years ago, which was just a few years before the official name changed to Philippine Eagle. So yeah, that's in terms of their area where they can survive, much reduced compared to the harpy eagle or the crowned eagle in Africa, which still have, even though they're under pressure as well and locally endangered in various areas, total population wise, the harpy eagle and crowned eagle are still doing much better. The territory had been estimated at 100 square kilometers. So if two eagles need a territory of 100 square kilometers, and considering there's only 9,220 square kilometers of old-growth forests in the Philippines, there's just not enough territory for the population to, sustain a healthy number, because so much of their territory has been deforested. Life expectancy for a wild Philippine eagle is estimated to be from 30 to 60 years. If it is up to 60 years, that would make them among the longest-lived birds in the world. Cockatoos, there's an albatross that's in its 70s, I believe. There was a cockatoo that's confirmed to be 82 or 83 that died at a zoo a few years back. And then there was an umbrella cockatoo that passed away last year in Florida, Augusta, said to be 99, but they couldn't confirm that one, so it didn't get in the Guinness Book of Records. But anyway, incredibly long-living species. A captive Philippine eagle lived for 41 years in Rome Zoo, and it was already an adult when it arrived at the zoo. So that 41-year-old eagle in Rome, Philippine eagle, this must have been, more than 50 years ago, because there haven't been, the last Philippine eagle to die in Europe, or the last Philippine eagle that lived in Europe, was at Antwerp Zoo, and that one passed away in 1988. So it's been, the last Philippine eagle outside of Asia. As I said, there's one living in Singapore at the moment, and all other known Philippine eagles are currently in the Philippines. So the last Philippine eagle outside of Asia was one that passed away at Antwerp Zoo 37 years ago. That's kind of crazy to me. I mean, I understand on one level that you because the birds are so rare that you don't want to be sending them to zoos all over the world. On the other hand, I think that because there are, zoos such as San Diego Wildlife Park, and there are many Los Angeles Zoo that help save the California condor, and there are many great zoos around the world. Sydney Zoo, Melbourne Zoo is pretty good. There are amazing zoos in Europe, of course, that have the world's best technology. I feel that they should be setting up, a colony, a satellite colony, and especially it's risky to put all your eggs in one basket, as they say. But currently, the Philippine Eagle Center in Davao is the only place where they have a captive breeding program. So, anyway, but yeah, there was 41 at Rome Zoo. Another captive Philippine eagle lived for 46 years at the Philippine Eagle Center in Davao. Okay, so the oldest one at that Philippine Eagle Center was 46. They say wild birds on average are believed to live shorter. And again, that's quite common because in the wild there are many more threats. Of course, they get threats from being shot at by humans, but also easy for an old bird to get injured, and then it makes it harder for them to hunt. And as an apex predator, they catch monkeys and flying lemurs and flying foxes. Predators face a greater risk because, they can get injured if they don't strike their prey perfectly. Prey specimens found at the eagle's nest have ranged in size from a small bat weighing 10 grams to a Philippine deer weighing 14 kilograms. So it seems the largest animal that a Philippine eagle can catch and take to its nest is 14 kilograms, which would make it, much, more than double its body weight. So it can carry double its body weight up to a nest. That's incredible. Very, very powerful bird. They only lay one egg every 2 years, and again, this is partly why they're so hard to get their population back up. It's also why it's very difficult to survey them in the wild. And I was listening to a podcast where one of the researchers, what was his name? Neil Rettig, Rettig, Neil. He was one of the pioneers, and he, along with Robert Kennedy, no relation to the Kennedy, political family. There was an ornithologist who passed away last year. So Neil Rettig, the world-renowned cinematographer, and Robert Kennedy, the world-renowned ornithologist, they basically suggested to President Marcos that the name monkey-eating eagle wasn't a good one because many people have, sympathy, empathy for monkeys, and that was part of the reason why many people didn't support the eagles in the Philippines. They thought, well, they're a horrible animal killing lovely monkeys. And then Marcos wisely, give him some credit, a very corrupt person and horrible. Apparently there were many people murdered under Marcos's martial law regime. So overall, a pretty horrible person by all accounts, and very corrupt. But he did say, if the monkey-eating eagle is endemic to the Philippines, why not call it the Philippine Eagle? So it was basically a combination of Robert Kennedy, the ornithologist, nothing to do with politics, and Neil Rettig, the cinematographer, talking with Marcos. I believe they met him in they started filming the Philippine Eagles in 1977. The name officially changed in 1978. Oh yeah, I was talking about they only lay one egg every 2 years, and until 1977, until the first time Philippine eagles had ever been captured on camera. So this was, pioneering work by Kennedy and Rettig. They were really, those days cameras were so heavy. So if you watch the documentary, it's called Bird of Prey. You can actually now watch it for free on YouTube. So if you search for bird of prey Philippine eagle. It should come up there. It's got more than 2 million views. And this incredible award-winning documentary, I think it's rated very highly on IMDb. I think it's 8.9 or something. And so incredible. If you're interested in the Philippine eagles, this would be the best documentary to watch. It's an hour and 30 minutes. So yeah, it was uploaded to YouTube 4 years ago by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Of course, the Cornell Lab, probably the world's most famous in terms of trying to protect bird species and bird research. Watch that documentary, and they do a great job cutting between the footage from they started filming in 77. I think it took them 3 years. Yeah, it was 3 years of work in that, from 77 to 1980. In that meantime, they got the name of the eagle changed after they met with President Marcos. And then a documentary came out in 1981, and that documentary was called To Live and Be Free. And curiously, I can't find this documentary anywhere online. You would think that they would have uploaded that. Maybe no one's restored the documentary, I don't know. But so the first ever Philippine Eagle documentary came out 1981, 44 years ago, and that was produced by Neil Rettig and Robert Kennedy. And yeah, there's no upload of that. There's no clips from that. Well, there are clips from that within the Bird of Prey documentary. So this newish documentary came out in 2018, and I think it was only available on Amazon 6 years ago, but then 4 years ago they uploaded it for free on YouTube. So yeah, you can actually see footage from 1977 to 1980, those pioneering years, and it's just incredible. They're carrying these very, very heavy cameras on their back, and it took them months and months to find a Philippine eagle. And yeah, part of the difficulty was they didn't know that Philippine eagles only laid one egg every 2 years. So sometimes they would find a pair of eagles and they would assume that they were breeding, but then they realized that actually it was one of their off years. They'd just finished raising the chick from the previous year. So apparently they talk about this in the documentary, that between the early 1960s and late 1970s, not a single nest had been found all over the Philippines. So it just shows you how under-researched the bird was. And, to my thinking, I mean, they're a good candidate for the world's most spectacular bird. Forget, let alone eagle, one of the world's most spectacular animals. I mean, of course, the giant panda, the panda became the symbol of the World Wildlife Fund, which led to panda research and a lot of money. Of course, the Chinese government, very savvy business-wise, they only loan out pandas to other zoos, and if a panda is born abroad in another zoo, it's still property of the Chinese government. But thankfully, the panda has been saved as it became a symbol of, wildlife conservation all over the world, particularly being the WWF symbol. And I feel like the Philippine eagle, it should be, on the same level. So, good thing that the panda was saved. It's interesting that the Chinese government, they kind of very savvy to realize that there was big money to be made in pandas. I remember as a kid, like the Australian bicentenary, the bicentenary of European colonization Australia, 1988, we had some pandas that came to Melbourne Zoo, and they were on loan, and they were only there for a few months, and you had to queue up for hours to see these pandas. So they call it, panda diplomacy. I'm not advocating for Philippine eagle diplomacy. What I'm advocating for is that they set up some colonies or breeding programs outside of the Philippines. So, this is not really a novel idea. So, supposedly they're trying to make that happen in Singapore, but it's already been 6 years since they first lent this pair to Singapore. One died, and now it's been 2 years, and they still haven't got another bird. So obviously, one female in Singapore, it's impossible to breed them. And I kind of feel that that's a token effort anyway, because if you're sincere about starting a breeding program, you'd need more than 2 birds. I really, really hope that, for example, maybe 10 birds or a dozen birds are sent to the best zoo in Europe. I don't know what the best zoo in Europe is. Maybe Antwerp Zoo, or the best zoo in United States. Maybe the San Diego Wildlife Park. Maybe Sydney Zoo. I mean, Australia's closer to the Philippines than Europe and America, but it is very risky, to put all your eggs in one basket. And so better one breeding center than nothing. But it seems that the breeding program has stalled a bit in recent years. Okay, I'll read a bit about that. In 1992, the first Philippine eagles were hatched in captivity through artificial insemination. However, the first naturally bred eagle was not hatched until 1999. The first captive bred bird to be released into the wild, Kabayan, was released in 2004 in Mindanao. However, he was accidentally electrocuted 1 year later. Another eagle, Cub Subua, was released in March 2008 but was shot and eaten by a farmer. In 2015, an eagle was released after being treated for a gunshot wound. 2 months later, it was shot and killed. Killing this critically endangered species is punishable under Philippine law by 12 years in jail and heavy fines. It numbers, they mentioned several birds there that were killed. Whether they actually enforce those laws, I don't know. But this is, aside from the biggest threat is deforestation, and then the second biggest threat would be continued poaching, killing. Its numbers have slowly dwindled over the decades to its current population of 180 to 600, 100. They're very broad here, so who knows how many Philippine eagles are left in the wild. So the low number they suggest is 180. The high is 600. So that's a broad range there, but a series of floods and mudslides caused by deforestation further devastated the remaining population. The Philippine eagle may soon no longer be found in the wild unless direct intervention is taken. Yes, okay. The Philippine Eagle Foundation in Davao City is one organization dedicated to the protection and conservation of the Philippine eagle and its forest habitat. The Philippine Eagle Foundation has successfully bred Philippine eagles in captivity for over a decade and conducted the first experimental release of captive bred eagle to the wild. As of 2025, the foundation has bred 31 eagles, so that's impressive, through captive breeding. So I said it's a mixed bag. That's great that they've bred 31 eagles in captivity, mostly through artificial insemination. However, here's the sad part. Breeding has slowed in recent years, in which the 28th and 30th chicks were bred in 2016, 2021, 2024, respectively. Okay, so the last 4 eagles have been over the last 9 years. So they're only breeding 1 eagle in captivity on average every 2 years. Yeah, that's not enough. I mean, considering the continued threats in the wild, having 1 breeding center and only since 2016 they're averaging 1 chick every 2 years. And unfortunately, the 29th and 30th chicks, the last 2 that have been bred in captivity, were not able to make it to adulthood. So not only is only 1 chick being born every 2nd year in captivity in total, but the last 2 haven't even survived to adulthood. And then this year, the 31st chick named Riley was hatched, but then died on the 16th of April due to undisclosed cause. So yeah, this makes me very sad. The last 10 years have been, it seems like they're going backwards, you know. So the low point was probably the early 1970s when, under martial law, you had the height of deforestation and the vast majority of Philippines rainforest, and that was to send wood to Japan. I live in Japan now, so that's very sad for me. This is like, you know, the housing boom during the economic boom in Japan, 1970s. Yeah, a lot of the wood was imported then because Japan had already depleted much of its forest then. Since then, forests in Japan have kind of made a comeback, but a lot of those forests, they're not non-native trees. So talking about old growth forest in the Philippines, and that was a low point in their history. Then you had the documentary came out in early 1980s, the name change in 1978, and so there was like a 30 years there where things seemed to be getting better. But if you look at the last 10 years, it really seems that the program is going backwards. I mean, I don't mean to offend anyone involved in the program. I know that the people in the Philippines involved at the Philippine Eagle Center and the Philippine Eagle, the Philippine Eagle Foundation, they're doing the best they can with limited, you know, financial resources. You know, just imagine if Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Zuckerberg, imagine if one of these guys donated, you know, 1% of their wealth, how much great work could be done to save the Philippine Eagle. And I knew things had sort of gotten worse in recent years, but I didn't realize it was that bad. Okay, and then here's another sad story. So last year, 2024, the Philippine Eagle Foundation decided to start a project which would involve the transportation of Philippine eagles in Leyte, Leyte. This is one of the 4 islands where they're found, but especially on the island of Leyte, they would be incredibly rare, where this species survives but may have been extirpated, as the last records were prior to Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. Yeah, so it seems that aside from this one introduced eagle there last year, I'll explain that in a second, but possibly the Philippine eagle already went extinct 12 years ago, post-Typhoon Haiyan, on this island of Leyte, Leyte. So then the Philippine Eagle Foundation, they doing the best they can, they decided to reintroduce 2 rescued eagles in June 2024 with tracking devices from Mindanao. They were brought from Mindanao to the island of Leyte, and they were released in the hopes that they would form a pair. But this project faced a significant setback when the male, named Uswag, U-S-W-A-G, was found dead at sea. I saw a video where another Philippine eagle was rescued at sea, so I guess maybe when there are typhoons or extreme weather events, sometimes they get blown off course and sometimes end up in the sea. But this one that was released last year on Leyte, island of Leyte, died at sea. Very, very sad. Researchers believe that this eagle got blown off course and drowned at sea. Yeah. As of October 2024, so the latest information, this is almost a year ago, so now we're in September 2025, almost October. The female, named Carlito, was documented alive and is hunting and able to fend for itself. So this is crazy to me. You have only one eagle outside the Philippines, that's in Singapore, and of course impossible for it to breed without a mate. You have one lone eagle on the island of Leyte, released last year. This other eagle died there last year, but why haven't they released another eagle to pair with it? I mean, okay, I kind of get it. Maybe they're concerned that more eagles will die, but then if that's the concern, why just have one eagle out there? Because obviously if you have a sole eagle, there's no chance for it to breed. So I really wish that they would... it seems they're just running out of, financial resources to push ahead with the program as best they can. And it seems that the high point of the captive breeding program was over 10 years ago. So again, I don't know why maybe because the economic situation has slowed. Of course, COVID pandemic, that was made everything worse, not only for people around the world economically, but for wildlife research. But here we are in late 2025, so we've passed the pandemic and hoping these breeding programs can get back on track. Okay, this is about the Philippine Eagle diplomacy. I mentioned panda diplomacy, so they actually, on the Wikipedia article, they do call it Philippine Eagle diplomacy. So in that regard, when I hear the word diplomacy, it's almost a little bit cynical. It's like they say, politically correct. This is a sarcastic term because politically correct means that someone is insincere with their words. You're kind of virtue signaling. And diplomacy suggests that it's not sincere wildlife, research or breeding program. Okay, so interesting. Before I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but it is officially labeled Philippine Eagle diplomacy. So in June 2019 wildlife loan agreement, a pair of Philippine eagles, Geothermica and 15-year-old male, and Samsig, 17-year-old female, were loaned to Jurong Bird Park. As I said, Jurong Bird Park closed 2 years ago, and they created a larger bird park. Before the pair was shipped, they were given 2 specially printed passports dedicated to them. The pair were scheduled to stay at Singapore for 10 years as part of the agreement. The move marked the initiation of the government's Philippine Eagle diplomacy program. As of 2024, Geothermica has died from lung infection. His body now taxidermied at the National Museum, while Sambisag remained in Singapore at the new bird park that replaced Jurong. Despite this setback, Singapore Zoo and Philippine Eagle Foundation maintain that this breeding program will continue, and it will be likely that another possible mate for Sambisag will be loaned. Okay, still waiting. 2 years, that hasn't happened. Briefly about other Philippine eagles that have been kept outside of the Philippines. So historically, about 50 Philippine eagles have been kept in zoos in Europe, England, Germany, Belgium, Italy, and France, the United States, and Japan. The first was a female that arrived in London Zoo in August 1909, but that bird died in 1910, so lasted August 1909 and died in February 1910, so it only survived about 6 months at London Zoo. The majority arrived in zoos between 1947 and 1965. So yeah, post-World War II, 1947, 1965, this was like the height of the boom in export of Philippine eagles. But of course then zoos around the world were not in a good state, and there was very little, they didn't really know how to breed rare animals then. So no wonder those exported eagles had kind of no chance of breeding. The last outside the Philippines died in 1988 in the Antwerp Zoo, where it had lived since 1964. Before I mentioned that the best documentary you could watch on the Philippine eagles, if you're interested to do a deep dive, is Bird of Prey by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And yeah, that was uploaded onto YouTube 4 years ago. So just search Bird of Prey, Philippine Eagle. That's an hour and 30 minutes, incredible documentary. And if you want to listen to a podcast, the best podcast I could find on the Philippine Eagle, it's called, it's part of the Raptor Rambles. So, I like to talk a lot. I ramble on. Raptor Rambles. If you search Raptor Rambles and Philippine Eagle, there's a special episode that came out in April 2021. That's 4.5 years ago. And they have a conversation with cinematographers James Aldred and Neil Rettig. So both of those cinematographers have filmed Philippine eagles in the wild on the nest, And Neil Rettig was one of those pioneers who spoke with Ferdinand Marcos in the late 1970s, which led to the name change. So especially listening to him was completely fascinating. And you just realized, for example, one of the craziest things he mentioned was how not only did they finally found a chick to film after 3 months of searching, but then after a few weeks, well, they filmed it from when the egg hatched, and then a few months later he actually observed the chick die after choking on a bone. So the parents, Philippine eagles, they have this huge beak, and they can swallow very, very large bones, similar to a lammergeier or bearded vulture. But unfortunately, sometimes the adult birds will feed their young, large piece of a dead animal. And so I think this was in 1977 or 1978 when they were first time they'd ever filmed a chick on the nest. And yeah, he was, 50 meters away or something, from a hide in another tree. And he felt completely helpless. He couldn't do anything. He just watched this poor eagle choke on a bone. Then they found another nest, and they managed to successfully film that, and that was part of that initial documentary that came out in 1981, which is called To Live and Be Free. But aside from some archive footage in Bird of Prey, the newer documentary came out in 2018 but released on YouTube 4 years ago. I couldn't find any other footage from that first ever documentary on the Philippine eagles. Anyway, great podcast. Listen to James Altered and Neil Rettig. Especially fascinating to listen to Neil Rettig because he's had this 50-year history with the Philippine eagles. And James Altered has also filmed them on the nest. I think he did it with National Geographic. There was a more recent documentary that he was part of. So yeah, you can check out Raptor Rambles, do a Google search on that, or you can find it in Spotify. That was like an hour fascinating conversation. Oh, and also Neil Rettig mentioned that him and Robert Kennedy, when they found that second nest to film, they basically had to negotiate with the logging companies to let them set aside a small part of the forest to do their filming. And they had, a handshake agreement. Apparently the logging company was very cooperative. However, after they talked, so the logging company kept up their end of the bargain to set aside this part of the forest to protect where the tree was, the nesting tree. But some slash and burn people that came in later, they set the whole forest alight. And so Neil Rettig and Robert Kennedy, they mentioned this to someone, and this got back to Marcos, and then Marcos shut down all these operations. Kind of ironic because it's because of him that these logging operations went out of control during the martial law period. But anyway, he shut it all down, and then the forest companies, they were bankrupted and all these people out of work, and so then there were severe death threats on Neil Rettig and Robert Kennedy's lives. So yeah, talk about trailblazers, and it was very, very exciting adventure, but also very, very scary. Kind of like Diane Fossey, who was murdered. There was that movie Gorillas in the Mist with Sigourney Weaver, came out in the late 1980s. Sigourney Weaver, Brian Brown, and thanks to that movie, thanks to Diane Fossey's research, but also thanks to that very popular Hollywood movie, that got the wheels turning to help save the mountain gorilla. So I really hope something similar can happen with the Philippine eagle, and especially considering that momentum has slowed in the last 10 years, and despite that amazing documentary, the captive breeding program is not going as well as it was over 10 years ago. I'll just read the last part of this article. If you're interested, you can check it out yourself. So the article is in the Eyrie of the Philippine Eagle, and that's on the All About Birds website. administered by the Cornell Lab, and this was published in 2017, written by Greg Brenning. So most of the article is talking about Neil Rettig's work, and I'll just fast forward to the end of the article. In November 2013, Rettig returned to the Philippines. So he was there from 1977 to 1980. Then after a 33-year absence, he returned, arriving in Davao City, a city that had tripled its population to 1.6 million. So this is another reason why, the Philippine eagle is threatened so much, because the Philippine population has increased so much, triple over those 35 years. Okay, he was stunned by the sheer humanity, noise, pollution, traffic, and congestion. But compared to his first film project, when Rettig and his crew were on their own on the search for eagles, this time they had plenty of help. The Philippine Eagle Foundation took them directly to nests. Without them, we couldn't have done it, says Rettig. At dawn, Rettig and his fellow cameraman again climbed high into the trees, remaining motionless, eyes glued at their viewfinders until sunset. The same swarms of gnats as before, the same long hours of tedium punctuated by glorious moments when adults flew into the nest, or the chick took its first clumsy wing beats to a nearby branch. All the time as Rettig watched a young eagle through his viewfinder, he wondered to himself, where will it go? When I look at that through the tunnel of vegetation at the ancient scene, I think, what future does that little guy have? How's he going to find his own territory when all the surroundings have been completely altered by the human landscapes? One day an adult swooped into his viewfinder and knocked its mate off its perch. Rettig was filming a Philippine eagle courtship behavior. They locked talons together, spiraled down, embracing each other, and then flared off at the last moment and soared in unison, riding their winds up along the forest cliff face. Rettig recalls they spent hours aerial-like all through the day. It was really almost like a celebration of life, a bonding event. It was beautiful to see. I've never seen anything like that. Actually, so if you look in the Bird of Prey documentary, Philippine Eagle documentary on YouTube, you can see, I'm not sure if it's the scene he's describing, but there is a scene where they clasp talons mid-flight. So at least he got some footage of that, whether this is the one he's describing here or another similar scene. After 6 months, Rettig had the images he needed of adults swooping through the canopy, gently tending to the chick, even prowling the forest floor for prey. And this time, the Ultra HD footage can be archived digitally and used forever. In the 3 years since he completed filming, Rettig has worked with the Cornell Lab to produce several films for the Philippine Eagle Foundation to show in rural communities near eagle territories and to school groups and families at the Eagle Center. A feature-length documentary entitled Agila Laban ni Naha, or Eagle Flight of Our Race, debuted on the largest TV network in the Philippines in June 2015. So this is a documentary that was only shown in the Philippines. I'm not sure if that was in English or Filipino. The images are really awesome, says Salvador. The high-definition cameras really do justice to the eagle, especially for people who have never been to the forest. Salvador says that if the Philippine eagle is to be saved, it will require a mass movement among Filipinos everywhere for the country's national symbol. And he stresses the eagle can still be saved. I don't think it's too late, Salvador says. I think we have a real chance of saving the eagles, even with the little that we have left. It's just a matter of political will and attitude of the Filipino people. The Foundation's Ibanez says the flight is not just for the future of the Philippine eagle, but for Filipinos themselves. As Dr. Dioscoro Raboa said, the Philippine eagles are as Filipinos as we are, Ibanez says. If we let deforestation destroy all our forests, if we let our fellow Filipinos shoot and hunt the Philippine eagles, if the Philippine eagle gets extinct because of these wrongdoings, it only means we have lost our connection to the environment. And at the end of the day, it would be the Filipinos who would suffer with the loss of our eagles and our forest. So, yeah, I mean, there's various schools of thought. China has basically taken control of the captive breeding program for pandas. I mean, pandas are bred now outside of China, but there's enough money and there's enough, financial incentive within China that they can successfully breed enough pandas in China. I'm not sure if the Philippine eagle can. I mean, a better analogy, I talked about the California condor earlier, but a better analogy might be the Spix macaw. And the Spix macaw went extinct in the wild in Brazil, and it was only through captive birds around the world. Initially, they set up a captive breeding program in Qatar, which was very successful. I think that lasted until 2014, and then the prince or the sultan, sorry, I might be wrong there, but anyway, a royal member of the royal family who was key to that captive breeding, financially supporting that captive breeding program, which was the only captive breeding program at the time, I believe. Maybe they had some birds in Brazil, but I think the only successful captive breeding program until 10 plus years ago for the Spix macaw was outside of Brazil, and they were extinct in the wild. So then what happened, the prince or sultan, he passed away, and then those birds were donated to a zoo in Germany, I think still with the financial backing from Qatar. And then those birds, they've bred hundreds of them, or they have a captive population of hundreds. I think initially there were only 7 birds, so inbreeding, genetic diversity, probably a problem there. But anyway, from those 7 initial birds taken from various private collections around the world, I think there were even some private birds in Switzerland. So yeah, I believe that the captive population in Qatar, a couple of decades ago, they purchased those birds from Switzerland and maybe some other places. And Brazil had its own program going, but not particularly successful from what I recall. And then, yeah, they did a good job in Qatar, and then they sent those birds to Germany. Now they're sending those Spix's macaw from Germany back to Brazil, and so it's really a collaborative effort. If it weren't for, the power and influence of that Saudi royal family, sorry, not Saudi, Qatari, if it weren't for the power and influence of that Qatari royal family to purchase those Spix's macaw from Switzerland, and then if they hadn't been sent to Germany where, the latest research had helped breed them up to hundreds, now the Spix's macaw captive breeding program would be in a much worse position. And even though the Philippine Eagle Center in Davao has been doing a great job, and since 1992, but there's the sad thing is that it seems the last 10 years it hasn't been going so well. I think most of their focus has been on capturing wild or injured birds, and they have tried various things such as releasing captive birds into the wild in late, but that didn't go so well. And yeah, the captive breeding program in Singapore is basically a non-event. It's diplomacy. So I feel that the Philippines probably can't do this alone. And Neil Rettig, in that podcast I listened to on Raptor Rambles, he was of the same opinion. He's probably the most experienced person still alive. Robert Kennedy, the ornithologist who worked with Rettig, he passed away last year, so rest in peace. So the last living person who still remembers those pioneering days of research in the Philippine Eagle, Neil Rettig, he's of a similar opinion to me. I already thought this, but then I re-listened to that podcast today to prepare for this video. And yeah, he mentioned that he thinks their best chance of survival is to set up captive breeding populations outside of the Philippines, as a security, in case like you could have a outbreak of some disease at the center in Davao that would decimate the captive breeding program, and also to help generate interest in funding the project, so getting other countries excited about it. And I think something like that needs to happen. Neil Rettig also, he was of mixed feelings about having a nest cam. He said that if you had a nest cam, I mean, you have like bald eagle nest cams in America. There's a white-bellied sea-eagle nest cam in Sydney. I think there might be a white-bellied sea-eagle nest cam in Singapore as well. There's white-tailed eagle nest cams in Europe and bearded vulture in Spain. Various countries have set up these nest cams which help generate interest in eagles and other raptors, peregrine falcons in the UK and nesting on churches and whatnot. But Neil Rettig, he said that he's not sure nest cam would be the best thing, because people would realize, the dark side of eagle behavior. I mean, if people see a Philippine eagle bring back a dead monkey and feeding it to its chicks, this might actually, mean that the eagle loses public support. So, but at least setting up breeding programs outside the Philippines seems to be the way to go. So, come on, Elon Musk. Come on, Jeff Bezos. Come on, Bill Gates. Come on, Mark Zuckerberg. You guys have the money. Come on, James Cameron. These people that, say they're interested in the environment, but, they talk the talk, but how about walking the walk and saving one of the most iconic species? I mean, in terms of flying birds, Philippine eagles, just amazing. But anyway, I'm blabbering on now. I think I've said enough. Anyway, thanks for listening. Take it easy. Have a good one. Ciao for now.
It's built slowly with a couple of pieces each day over a 4 to 5 day period. This lets the eagles become familiar with the new, odd-shaped structure in the neighborhood. At the nest site, they build from 3 to 5 hides. The first one is about 200 yards away. The final hide is about 25 yards away, and slightly above the nest so as to be able to see into it.
So what we did is we found a smaller neighboring tree, and we sent a rope across to the main limb of the nest tree, and then we basically just used carabiners and pulled our way across. Neil was actually the first person to go across. I followed him. And this was like a unique lifetime experience. Here I had this young eaglet of a pair that produces only one young eaglet every 2 years. In my hands, one of the rarest living things on the planet. And we got the first photographs of the eaglet in the nest, up close and personal. And then I proceeded to do that climb every 10 days.
Every 10 days, he climbs the nest tree to weigh, measure, and photograph the eaglet.
Well, when you're doing that, you've got one of the largest, most powerful eagles in the world, and here you are dangling from a rope at 120, 140 feet off the ground. And eagles and many birds of prey do not like people to enter their nests or get near their nests. And so they will attack. And the guys would photograph that.
Neil, do you ever see the female anywhere? Over.
She's in the green.
Big tree, over. Okay. Yeah, we can just make her out up on that limb. As soon as she leaves the tree, I'll let you know. Over now.
I had straddled this very large branch where the nest was. And I heard from the guys up on the hill, "Here she comes."
Watch out, here she comes. She's coming right now.
And I just looked out of the corner of my eye and, over my shoulder, and she was heading at me, and I went like this. And she put a gash in the helmet and punctured my arm, tore my arm open.
Hey, it looks like she got a piece here that time.
Did you get it?
Yeah, oh, I
You
got
guys
it.
get that? Over.
Looks like Bob might have a few scars on him.
Over.
I saw the whole thing through the viewfinder, and it looked like Kennedy might have got hit in the head
He's
and
got blood on him
shoulder.
down there.
Yeah, you saw it right. There's about a 4-inch gash down his shoulder and little blood coming out, and then I can see a long, deep gouge in the helmet.
A little blood.
It's his neck. Over.
You can't imagine the feeling of power, of grandeur of an animal like this until you really get up close.
I remember clearly the first time I ever saw a Philippine eagle, and I was completely blown away by how different it was from so many other birds of prey that I know. It's got this beautiful crest that stands up, and it's got these beautiful blue eyes, and it's got bone-crushing, powerful feet. You can imagine what it's like to be a monkey when they're in a troop. They're trying to protect their young ones. When this top-notch predator comes in,
I have seen two individuals hunting together, and occasionally you'll see one eagle kind of distracting monkeys when another eagle would come up from behind and grab one, kind of like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park. Unlike many birds of prey that don't necessarily eat large bones, the eagles do eat large bones. They get it in their mouth and then they go like this to force it down into their crop. Well, beagles don't realize if you offer that thing to a chick, the chicks are not capable of dealing with it.
there's been numerous times when I've watched the eaglet taking a bone that long and trying to choke it down. You know, it's a scary thing to watch, because I always relate back to that awful day.
It's at this early stage of the nesting cycle that the chick is most vulnerable. The filming is going well, but the men know it's a critical time.
I thought everything was pretty much on course. We had succeeded in finding the nest. We had a healthy chick, and everything was going great. And then tragedy struck.
It was January 19th, 1978. I was the only one there. I was alone in the blind. I couldn't believe what I had just seen, what just happened.
I just can't imagine going out, setting up to film that morning, seeing that the eaglet is in trouble and not being able to do anything about it.
And then the crisis comes. The chick chokes on a bone and dies.
And the whole project just fell apart right then and there. I fell apart. This was the same chick I watched hatch. I made sketches of, recorded all the detail. I had kind of a real bond with that baby eagle. And then we had to go out and find another nest, and that took 2 months of searching.
But at last, with the help of their Filipino colleagues, they find what they've been searching for. Once again, almost hidden.
You know, it happens in nature. Nature is not necessarily the nicest place out there.
The 3 eagles that live here are 3 of 300 birds in the world. And they're raising this chick as if nothing's changed for thousands of years. They can't comprehend that this baby, when he leaves, he has no place to go.
The home of the eagle is threatened by the demand for hardwoods in distant countries. Rich countries like Japan, Europe, and the United States want that timber. To satisfy this apparently insatiable demand, logging goes on day and night.
In the late 1970s, the logging industry was booming. Every road, every highway in the Philippines had logging trucks back and forth, 24 hours a day.
I'm happy to see that the reaction throughout the country is favorable. I have received hundreds and hundreds of telegrams from all corners of the Philippines congratulating you, and incidentally me, for the proclamation of martial law.
The height of logging was during the martial law era, where they were cutting down close to 400,000 hectares a year.
President Marcos used the forest as a tool to enrich his friends and himself, and as a tool to remain in power.
All you had to do was be relatively close to politicians, give them money during campaigns, and they'll give you these concessions.
There was really no incentive to protect anything.
The eagle's home is removed wholesale in this onslaught of modern technology. 2 acres of forest are felled every 1.5 minutes.
I saw how enormous the loss was, how greedy Marcos was. It wasn't just the money he stole from us, it was the forest which he stole from the Filipino people.
Most of the concessions were in remote areas, and in order to get there, you had to build roads to get in.
When you build a road to the forest, for whatever reason, it becomes bad for the forest because people trek in. And when people trek in, you can't stop them from trying to make a living.
Population pressure became intense, and people who didn't have land or didn't have farms in the lowlands, didn't have jobs in the lowlands, they'd move up and do slash and burn farming. And the forest quickly disappeared.
I mean, there were hardly even remnants of trees left. There might have been some stumps and things like that, but for as far as you could see, some places were gone.
We've gone through millions of years of the diversity that we now have in the Philippines, and in 100 years we've decimated it.
I'm hopeful that we will make a difference, because I think we made a difference 36 years ago. The work we did has bought the eagle time. Time by influencing people, even President Marcos.
The eagle was described as Pithecophega jeffreyi. Pithecos meaning monkey and phega meaning eater or destroyer. So from the beginning of time, this bird was known even to the local people as a bird that eats monkeys. Well, you go in and talk to people about the monkey-eating eagle and how important it is, and they take up sides with the monkeys. So it was very important that we get rid of that name. When we went in to see Marcos, we said, this is a bird that does eat monkeys, but rarely. And we think that it's getting a bad rap by being called a monkey-eating eagle. And the president said, well, if it's only found in the Philippines, why don't we call it the Philippine Eagle? Bingo, you know. So he passed a special presidential proclamation changing the name from monkey-eating eagle to Philippine Eagle. Probably the only name of a bird in the history of ornithology that's been changed by a president.
I don't like to put human emotion into animals, but I can tell you what, it seemed to me like they were just enjoying that day in pair bonding, celebrating the fact that they've got a young eagle that's healthy and robust. And the first time I've ever seen anything like that.
I think all of us have to realize that saving the Philippine eagle and saving Philippine forests really goes way beyond what meets the eye. It's really saving our very own source of livelihood, our very own future as a country.